Well, hello all. Recently I had a lovely winter stealth camp in the middle of a thicket in a tent in the brush, and I thought I'd cleared a space properly. So when I pitched my tent, I didn't realize I pitched it on a thorn, and the thorn went through the ground sheet of the tent and went into my air mattress. Now, I love tents with a built-in ground sheet. We didn't have that in our youth, and it just keeps all the muck and the little mosquitoes and midges and perhaps scorpions and everything out, snakes. So the built-in ground sheet's wonderful. And then when we were kids as scouts, we used to sleep on a poncho. It was a terrible, like a rubberized thin thing, and the cold just got into your bones, and we didn't have very good sleeping bags. You could literally see through the sleeping bag. So those were absolutely miserable nights. And having stealth camp for a while, I thought, now I'm going to, for the first time I think in my life, buy an air mattress. Wow, what a difference that made. We're all set for a lovely winter stealth camp. I think the tent is completely waterproof. It's going to be absolutely great. So I've had my air mattress and I've been stealth camping on it and sleeping beautifully. Oh, I recommend it. I just blow it up. Don't use a pump or anything. It takes about 3 minutes away from my life every time I have to blow that thing up, but it's still so worth it. You see, the cold doesn't come down up from the ground, and that's where you get the real cold from. And so it's been wonderful. But this last stealth camp, I punctured it. I could feel when I woke up at about 1 or 2 in the morning that the air mattress was fairly flat, and I reached under it, felt around, and I could feel this thorn coming up through the bottom of the ground sheet. And so I broke it off, and then, now I had to fix the air mattress. So there is the puncture. Here is the patch that's supposed to go onto it, but I don't believe it's going to stick with this velvety surface. So what I'm going to try is, I bought this bicycle repair kit, and I'm going to try and see if I can fix it with this bicycle repair kit. So let's put some of this. Let's open this little thing of bicycle glue. I'm going to put some there. Get the patch size, which is about that big, and we're going to mark the outline of the patch and then fill it inwards. So I'm hoping that by covering these little hairs with glue, that a bicycle patch will actually stick better, because as I say, I don't think with a hair so we're going to leave that to dry. So I'm going to so we're sticking a bicycle patch on the velvety side of this air mattress. And I know the air mattress came 2 years ago with a puncture repair patch, but that was 2 years ago. And I thought to myself, now where on earth would I in my house put this little patch so that I wouldn't lose it? Now think for yourself, if you'd bought an air mattress, have you got a place where you could put a patch and know in 2 years time or 3 or whenever you get a puncture where that patch is going to be? And I thought, I haven't seen that patch since I bought the air mattress, and I've thrown out the packaging and the box in which the air mattress came. So I thought, let me look on top of the cupboard where I might have put the packaging before I threw it out. And as I was about to look on the cupboard, I opened the cupboard door, and there I saw this patch stuck with a piece of sellotape against the inside of the cupboard door. It's been stuck on the inside door of my cupboard since the day I bought it, and I've not, in all those years, ever seen this. Even though I didn't eventually use it because my puncture was on the velvety, I think they call it the flocking part of the air mattress. So I thought, this little patch, if you pull off the, I guess it's got a, I think you can pull something off here and it leaves it with a sticky side. I thought that sticky side is definitely not going to stick to the flocking. So I did a YouTube search and they said, well, shave the flocking off and use a sharp knife or a razor blade. I tried it. I'll show you the video. And I couldn't get the flocking off. So I thought, well, let's go and buy a bicycle repair kit. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shave it in all directions so that it's the size of this patch that I've got. I've also got this knife that can maybe also put some glue on it that will stick those little hairs down. And I patched it with this little bicycle repair kit. And yeah, it seems to be working perfectly. When I submerged it under soapy water, no bubbles were coming out through the patch. So it seems like you can actually patch an air mattress on the flocking side with a bicycle repair kit. And but to get back to, it just amazed me when I found this little patch on the inside of my cupboard, a cupboard door that I've opened for the last 2 years every day, multiple times possibly, and I'd never seen this patch stuck to the inside of the door. And I thought, well, that was actually quite a clever thing to do 2 years ago, because obviously I thought at the time every day I opened the cupboard door, I'd see this patch, and yeah, it would remind me if I ever needed it. Because, I mean, a patch is like a random little item. There's no particular, it doesn't fit into any category where you would place things in your house. You know, I have a man drawer, but it's so full of other stuff that I wouldn't find it even in my man drawer. So I obviously decided I'd be clever and stick this patch onto the inside of a cupboard. And if someone had to hold a gun to my head, I would have told them, I haven't seen that patch since I bought the air mattress. If you give me a day or two, I could search my whole house and see if I could find this patch, and I wouldn't know where to start looking. So what so amazed me was how one can go through 2 years of life. This thing is right in front of me every time I open the cupboard door, and I haven't seen it in 2 years. It was just like, just you could smell the burning rubber in my brain, that it just melted it. It just, sure, that's weird. And then just the very day that I need that patch, and I'm kind of beginning to look for it there, suddenly my eyes are opened and I see this patch stuck to the inside of the door. It's like, that is also amazing to me, that I've lost it for 2 years and suddenly when I needed it, I found that patch. But it got me thinking about how people can be kind of blind to something. And I'm not saying there's nothing supernatural about me finding this patch, but it did get me thinking about a superpower of Jesus, where he had the ability to make people blind, actually not see things. So Christ could make the blind to see, but he could also make the seeing to be blind. And this is one of the superpowers that Jesus had. And some of the miracles that he performed, that if you ask websites, give me a list of all the miracles which Jesus performed. You will never find that they will mention this as a miracle, but it is a miracle. So there's a few superpowers that Christ had that nobody ever considers as miracles that he performed. I'll give you an example of some other superpowers which he had. For example, he had the ability to see. That means see at a distance. He could see things happening through brick walls, through mountains, miles away. I'll give you an example. So when Nathaniel is called, Philip goes to Nathaniel and brings him to Christ. And Christ says to Nathaniel, and Nathaniel asks Christ, well, where do you know me from? Because maybe Christ said, I want to see Nathaniel. And Christ said, I saw you even sitting under the fig tree even before Philip came to you. And Nathaniel was blown away. This was a miracle to him. How could Christ see him under a fig tree miles away, somewhere else? So Christ literally said to him, I saw you under the fig tree. Christ was what they call a seer. By a miraculous means, he could see at a distance through brick walls what was happening. So that's just one example of a miracle that nobody will ever mention that Christ could perform. Another example of Christ seeing is when the disciples asked, where shall we eat the final Passover? And Christ said, you'll go into this town and you'll find a man carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him back to the house, and that's where we're going to have the Passover. Tell the owner of the house, I want to keep the Passover there. So Christ could see this man leaving in the morning from the house with a pitcher empty. He was going to the well. He was going to pick up some water and he was going to go back to the house, and he could see that the disciples would meet him and go and be able to follow him back to where they were going to keep the Passover. So that is that's an example of Christ's superpowers. His ability, which nobody thinks about as a miracle, but it's a genuine miracle to be able to see things. Then there are other instances where Christ could read people's thoughts. And it could be part of the seeing power, but Christ could also, for example, a Samaritan woman, he could tell her how many people that she'd slept with. Yes, you've had 5 husbands, but this last person is not your husband. So Christ could either read her thoughts, or he had the God-given miraculous ability to see into her life and see what she'd done. And another example is, I think, when the Pharisees bring this woman caught in adultery, and he says, whoever's without sin among you, throw the first stone. And even without looking at them, he's writing in the dust of the ground. And I think he was writing the sins of each of the Pharisees in order, because it said they went out from the first, the most important Pharisee, the chief Pharisee, to the last. And I suppose I believe he was seeing into their life. He was reading their thoughts. He knew their lives, and he was writing the names of the people that they'd slept with, or the sins they'd committed, or wherever they'd broken the 10 Commandments. And he was just writing it in the dust there, and then he'd cover it, and the next Pharisee would come along and he'd write this Pharisee's sins. You could say that's speculation, but why would they go out from the chief to the least? And then he was left with the woman, and he said, go and sin no more. So we tend to just say, well, they lost interest in stoning this woman, or they lost interest, or no, he was writing something very important that convicted them of their sins. And what was the thing that would convict them? That's their actual sins, showing them that you are not without sin. You're just like this woman caught in adultery. You have your sins. You can't throw the first stone. So that would be an example of him being able to see, to be able to see things in people's lives. And perhaps, as the Bible in many scriptures says, he could actually read their thoughts. For example, should we pay tribute to Caesar? He knows they're coming with an angle to capture him, that no matter which answer he gives, if he says pay taxes to Caesar, he's damned, because now it was a very unpopular thing. And if he says don't do it, well, then he can be accused of treason. And what does he do? He says, render to Caesar what is Caesar, to God what is God's. And his wisdom, that's also like a miraculous wisdom, that he could see people's thoughts or read them And then he had the miraculous wisdom to be able to counteract their crafty plots. But I want to get on to what I consider a superpower that very, very few people know that Jesus had. And it's the way that he avoided, in his 3.5-year ministry, being captured and killed. Can you think of what that superpower is that Christ had that stopped him on many occasions from being captured and killed? And I'm just going to go through 2 occasions where the first is where he visits his hometown of Nazareth. He reads the scripture in Isaiah, which says that he will let the prisoners free, open the eyes of the blind. And Christ says, this day, this is fulfilled in your eyes. And he begins to berate them. And then they want to take him over and throw him off the edge of a cliff that is apparently there in Nazareth. And then, as this whole lynch mob is taking him to the edge of this cliff, it says that he hid himself from them and he just walked through the crowd and escaped. Christ had a superpower, and you know what that superpower was? How do you think a lynch mob could lose the one person they're wanting to lynch? It's a miracle. And it says that he hid himself from them. He had the ability to blind their eyes, not make them completely blind, but to blind their eyes to him so that they couldn't see him, or to make himself invisible. It's the same difference. And then he just walked through the middle of the crowd. They couldn't see him anymore. And there was another occasion where I think he was in the temple, and the Pharisees, and he told them, before Abram was, I am. And I am is the name for God. And they knew that he was saying, before Abram was, I am the God that spoke to Abram and has always been. And they picked up stones to stone him. And then he also just escaped from them. He escaped from their midst. Here's a second lynch mob about to stone him. And then they can't find him. He's again put on his invisibility cloak, and he just walks through the midst of the crowd that want to kill him. And I thought, isn't that just so interesting how Christ had this ability to just disappear? I could say so much on the story how Christ was a stealth camper for the 3.5 years. He just merged into, at night he would just disappear, the disciples, so there's no example of them being harassed or anything. So he was a stealthy person. For the first 30 years of his life, he just lived stealthily in his hometown. And the people of Nazareth didn't even know about him. He just merged. He just disappeared into the woodwork. And they said, isn't this the carpenter's son? They had almost no recollection of him. And even when they came to arrest Christ, he was so stealthy that they had to have Judas kiss Christ. Otherwise, they couldn't recognize him. This is the superstar of the day. The superstar of the day. The Taylor Swift, the Liam Neeson, the whoever. Think of any pop star. How could you miss a pop star? But they had to have Judas actually come, take them to Christ, and kiss him to identify Christ. Christ was so ordinary looking. So I think it almost like had a stealthy ability that he was very hard to identify. And one time he went up, told the disciples and his family, go up to the Feast of Tabernacles. I'll follow off. I'm not coming now. And then he followed up, and he was there at the Feast of Tabernacles. This pop star, nobody recognized him until he started teaching in the temple. And then they said, isn't this Jesus? And it began to dawn on them just from his preaching, this must be Jesus. So Christ naturally had this very stealthy lifestyle, a very stealthy way of doing things. He was always escaping the crowds and heading to the mountains or going. He was always merging and disappearing from the big crowds. He'd come, preach, heal, gone. And even on that last night in the Mount of Gethsemane, where he's sleeping among the olive trees, they have this superstar disappears into the Mount of Olives, not far from where he was preaching in the temple, and they need Judas. They have to pay him the cost of a whole potter's field to find Christ and then identify Christ. That's how stealthy Christ was. I mean, had they no way of telling where the superstar lived? And don't forget, Jerusalem was super crowded. Nobody knew where he was. And this is how stealthy Christ was. And I identify with stealth. I love stealth. To me, it's a way of protecting yourself. It's an invisibility blanket. If I've arrived at a stealth camping site undetected, I feel so safe because nobody knows I'm there now. If I don't make a noise, don't show a light, no one's ever going to find me unless they accidentally stumble upon me, and who's walking around at night. So identify with Christ's stealthy abilities. And as I say, he had this, but a real superpower of being able to blind people's eyes to him so that he could just walk through a mob that was wanting to destroy him. And these miracles are not highlighted because Christ didn't want to draw too much attention to himself. He was mission focused, which is to preach the gospel. He's not trying to look at my superpowers, look at my ability to read minds, read thoughts, to disappear, to see into people's lives. Those are not the things he was trying to emphasize. He was trying to emphasize the healing gospel. So I thought these things were actually quite fascinating, and as I say, it was prompted by this thought of patching up this air mattress of mine.